Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We are so glad to have you with us today for a virtual meeting with a very special guest. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Rachel, and I work with the education team at the Natural History Museum. Inspired by our new special exhibition about the life and work of scientist and activist Dr. Jane Goodall, we're going to be highlighting career paths in science with a special guest, ant scientist, myrmecologist Nadia Naji. We'll discuss important urban biodiversity research happening right here in Los Angeles, the importance of representation and identity in STEM careers, and how we can all participate in local scientific discoveries during this live virtual presentation. I'm joined today by our special guest, Nadia, who we'll learn a little bit more about in a moment, and some helpers from our education department and community science department who will be assisting behind the scenes. Thanks, Julie, Jessica, and Sam. We'll be together for about 30 minutes and get to learn more from Nadia today. After our guest is done sharing, we're going to answer some of your questions about her presentation. This might be a little bit of a different format of Zoom than some of our students joining today are used to. You won't see any of your classmates, your teacher, or any of the other people who are watching this program with us today, and we can't see or hear you. You'll only be able to see and hear us. So since we can't actually see one another, I want to take a moment to make a shout out to students joining us from all of today's schools. It's so fun to see some familiar and new school names on our list. Thanks so much for being here. So since we can't see any of you right now and you can only see us, we're going to use the chat function to ask questions. During Nadia's presentation, our friends who are watching on Zoom can click on the chat box to type in a question that we'll try to answer at the end of her presentation. Your chat box might look a little different depending on what device you're using right now, but you're going to look for the box that looks like the chat button that's on the screen up here. Type your question directly in the chat for us to see it, and your question will only be seen by the museum staff who are running this Zoom right now. The chat box is currently closed, but we will open it up during Nadia's presentation. As a reminder, we ask that all of our friends joining us today only put questions or comments related to the presentation in the chat. This helps us make sure we can get through as many of your questions as possible. And to respect our panelists and our staff who are assisting with this program, we also ask that we all use appropriate language in the chat. Folks not following our code of conduct may be asked to leave today's program. We'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible, but in case we don't answer your question today, I encourage you to record your ideas and write them down so you can learn more about what we're sharing today on your own. So if you'd like, grab a piece of paper and a pencil so you can record your experience while you're watching. You can note down any of those questions you have, or maybe a few facts that you've learned. So as I mentioned, today we're meeting with a special guest, Nadia Naji, who is a myrmecologist, someone who studies ants. Nadia is going to tell us a little bit about herself, who she is, what got her interested in a career in science, and what she's working on right now. Then we'll have an opportunity to ask her some questions. Hey, Nadia.
Hi, thank you so much. I would just like to say thank you to all of you wonderful folks at the Natural History Museum for having me today. And thank you so much to each of the students that have joined us today as well. I really can't wait to nerd out with all of you, tell you a little bit about me and my experience in STEM, and hopefully inspire some or all of you to get involved in some kind of science yourself. Bear with me as I check to make sure that everything is functioning. There we go. Okay, so just a little bit about me as a person. I am a proud brown queer woman. I was born and raised in California by my father, an immigrant from Syria, and my white American-born mother. So I had a good dose of that complicated gay mixed kid life growing up. And I'm really incredibly fortunate to be able to say that I'm also a first-generation college student, meaning that I am the first person in my family to go to college. And I'm sure many of you know what a big deal that is and may even be a first-generation college student yourself one day. That might be in your plans. So like I said, I've lived in California my whole life, and it was really the beauty of our state that made me fall so madly in love with nature and learning about wildlife at a very young age. I've always been a really huge nerd from the very beginning, and learning has always been one of my favorite things. It still very much is, in addition to spending time outside and listening to music. These traits have always been a really big part of my personality. However, I'll be honest and say that because of my many identities, for example, being ethnic or being queer, I haven't always felt super accepted in the spaces that I enjoyed most, like classrooms or the outdoors. So this discussion is going to touch a bit on that, how I overcame that sense of being unwelcome and feeling like I just didn't belong, just in case you might have felt something similar or might experience something similar in the future. And just FYI, I'd like to say that nobody ever gets to see old pictures of me from my emo phase in around 2011, so y'all should feel very special right now. So some information about me now and where I'm at now. I'll be honest, I didn't ever think I was going to get to the point I'm at now, and I haven't even graduated yet. So it's a bigger shock to me that I can explain accurately. I'm currently living my absolute best life, doing tons of really cool science as a fifth-year student in my classes at California State University, Fullerton. Yes, I said fifth year. Don't let anyone make you feel like you have to complete any one of life's goals on a certain time limit. Do things for you. It has greatly benefited me and will benefit you as well, I promise. I'm also currently involved in research as a member of the Southern California Ecosystems Research Program offered by Cal State Fullerton, which has led me directly to creating my own community science research project called Harvester Hunt, which ultimately brings me here today and we'll be discussing about a little bit more later. Finally, what I'm up to recently, or as of late, is that I am the outreach coordinator for the Desert Studies Center in the Mojave Desert, which is a job I really enjoy because it allows me to share really cool desert science with the public in a way that is accessible and fun. In my free time, you can still find me doing any of the things I love to do as a kid, but a lot more confidently. I really own my identity in these spaces. As you can see, my appearance has changed quite a bit in these spaces. My lovely boyfriend and I are constantly outside interacting with nature in all the ways we can do so respectfully, and love to post what we find, particularly on iNaturalist, which is another topic I'll be covering in more detail. So how did I get here? This honestly took a while to answer myself. It took a bit of thinking to figure out how I pulled myself out of feeling like I was completely unworthy to being in these spaces to completely owning them and taking up space. After thinking about it, I realized that it really all started pretty recently with a study abroad class that I took in 2020 in Baja California Sur, Mexico, and it completely changed my life. For me personally, it was the perfect experience. I didn't know what I was doing whatsoever, but I was put in the middle of nature with 8 other women of all different backgrounds. Together, we learned about the importance of conservation and restoration and different ways to protect important ecological habitats, excuse me. We did all kinds of stuff in 9 days that really exposed me to a ton of things that I had never seen before and was shown directly how to do them and left with all these skills that I didn't come in with. For example, we were building mini dams in degrading habitats, which you can see on the bottom in the middle there. We were building dams out of rocks to help accumulate soil and moisture. So basically when it rains and water is running down the hill, this dam will catch the water and the soil and will eventually help to support plant populations, giving them a place to grow that has nutrients and moisture. We studied all kinds of ocean life, including sea turtles and whale sharks in their natural habitat, and even got to design and perform our own mini research project while we were there, which you can see on the right. That's a photo of me and my classmate in the middle of separating soil out particle by particle with tweezers. A pain, but also really interesting and fun. I really got to learn a lot about every step of the scientific process and really fell in love with it. We had the choice to study whatever we wanted to in the space that we were in, and decided to study soil composition and water retention. And like I said, that experience was just so fun. I really fell in love with it and knew that this is what I wanted to be doing for the rest of my life. And that brings me, my slide would switch. There we go. That brings me to this fancy schmancy poster. Posters are a really common way to share results in the scientific community, especially at the college level, and makes information a lot easier and more fun to understand than reading a hefty 10-page paper of just text. You may have seen or created something similar in this style in your classrooms, but would you in a million years think that anyone could create something so professional and official looking without having any experience beforehand? It took me way too long to realize that, and I want to let y'all know that that's really the magic of working with other like-minded people that truly support you and what you're going for. And really what I love most about science. Absolutely anyone can do it and do it very well. There's this weird culture in STEM where people make you think that you need to have a degree or lots of formal training to be a scientist, and that is simply not true. P.S. The tools that we used for this project included paper Dixie cups and coffee filters, things that you might have in your kitchen right now. So you could legitimately replicate this study in your own backyard or any other place of interest. Yeah, it was a really magical process. Okay. So once I had this big realization and made my first poster after previously feeling like I was just not deserving to be in these spaces, I felt confident enough to put myself out there and be willing to learn through my experiences rather than expecting myself to know everything already. Really just being realistic about the fact that science is for everyone, and that anyone trying to make you feel as though it is not is just simply not correct, and not in it to support you. And finding success is really about finding people that believe in you and your abilities. So that overall really ended up paying off for me a lot as I applied to a really competitive program that I mentioned earlier called the Southern California Ecosystems Research Program, and got accepted. The program starts off with an intense research training over the course of like 6 weeks over the summer. So I did not get a break. I had to forfeit my summer for that class, but it really paid off. Because over those 6 weeks, I worked with 5 other students, again, a group setting where I could learn from other people, and studied 3 different organisms in their natural habitat, including birds, mussels, and oysters. I'm not gonna lie to you, I meant it when I said it was very intense. There was a ton of work involved, and we were required to wake up really early in the mornings oftentimes. But strangely enough, I realized that I kind of like the challenge of field work and having to work around the natural world to make it happen. There's something that I really like about that for some reason. And I learned so much within such a short amount of time doing that, thanks to the opportunity itself and being able to work with other students, learn from them, and build mentor relationships. So the purpose of the 6-week training program or the portion of the program is to give you the skills and confidence you need to join a lab and design your own research project, which is exactly how Harvester Hunt came to exist. I ended up joining a lab with a really incredible mentor who suggested a really great community science project on harvester ants. And it sounded so exciting, I just ran with it. I did not know anything about ants. I have never studied any insects of any kind, but it just sounded like a rad project. So I said yes, I ran with it, and I'm so glad that I did because I have learned so much once again, and I'm just continuing to further broaden my horizons. And here we are. That's how I ended up meeting the wonderful folks at the Natural History Museum through my mentor. And I've been working with them on Harvester Hunt ever since, which honestly has been a huge childhood dream come true and an opportunity that I thought I would never see. So I want to tell you all about Harvester Hunt, but I think there's first some vocabulary that we should refresh on just so everything makes sense. You may have seen some of these in class already, so hopefully this is a review or something familiar to you. So Harvester Hunt is a community science project, and community science is a collaboratively led scientific investigation, exploration, and engagement in the entirety of the scientific process. Formal training is absolutely not required. Typically with community science projects, all of the information that you need to participate is provided for you, and the skills that you need to do or to participate will come to you as you participate. An ecosystem is a community of living things interacting with each other and their non-living environment. There's the picture at the bottom included here is an example of an ecosystem. A species is a group of living organisms consisting of similar individuals capable of mating with one another to produce healthy offspring that can also reproduce with one another. Next, a native species is a species indigenous to a given region or ecosystem. So for example, we'll talk about it more in a couple minutes, but harvester ants are native species to California. Just a little bit more vocab, we're almost done with it. A non-native species is similar but different to a native species in that it is in the same area as a native species, although it is not indigenous to that area. It is introduced by human activity typically. An invasive species is an introduced organism that becomes overpopulated and negatively alters its new environment. Oftentimes, non-native species are or become invasive species and become destructive to the environment. Competitive exclusion is the elimination from a habitat of one of two different species that use the same resources. So if two animals they use the same resources for food, for habitat, ultimately one will outcompete the other and the other will go extinct. So getting back to harvester hunt, now that we have an idea of the important terms that we need to know to understand, who cares about ants anyway? They're pests, right? I am here to tell you no. And to change your mind about them. First of all, harvester ants are native to California, like I said, and therefore are really important to the health of our ecosystems. A whole lot of living things depend on the existence of harvester ants for food, such as lizards, birds, toads, and even other insects. Another thing that makes them super important is the fact that they are seed dispersers, which you can see in this video right here. They help plants by spreading their seeds and allowing populations to grow elsewhere in new places. You can See the I'm sorry. I'm sure you also all received that right now too. It's the emergency flood alert. Stay inside, y'all. Sorry about that. So anyways, you can see in that video that the harvester ant there is carrying a seed that is much larger than it. Fun fact, harvester ants are pretty cool. Besides their importance to the ecosystem, they can carry objects like this seed that are up to 50 times larger than their own body weight. So just thought that was fun. Reason number 2 of why we should care about harvester ants, they're facing a number of threats due to the growth of cities, which exposes them to pesticides, habitat loss, and competitive exclusion by the Argentine ant. The Argentine ant is a very aggressive, non-native, invasive species that is disrupting ecosystems everywhere, including here, and are directly taking resources away from harvester ants. And that's where the competitive exclusion comes in. Because of these issues, as an ant scientist, I want to use this project to understand where harvester ants are still thriving and what factors help them in those areas to help them survive. And that is where you and the rest of the community comes in to help. So contributing to community science projects like Harvester Hunt is super easy and doesn't require any training. Like I said earlier, the skills you need will be picked up as you go. For Harvester Hunt and for many community science projects, all you have to do is get outside, look for what the project is focused on, take a picture, and upload what you found. A lot of community science projects, including mine and many led by the Natural History Museum, use iNaturalist for observations to be submitted to. And the best way I could describe iNaturalist is that it's basically an Instagram for nerds and scientists. When you upload your photos there, there's a lot of data that comes with the pictures that scientists can use. And it's also really fun just to post what you find and get a species identification from people that possibly know more about those animals than you. So once you upload what you found to iNaturalist, voila, you've contributed to science. Like I said, there's a lot of data held within those photos, which scientists can use to, they can extract that data from the photo and use that in analysis of their project. And once you've uploaded, your observation is now a data point and can be used for if you are interested in participating in community science yourself, the collection period for Harvester Hunt 2021 has already ended, but the Natural History Museum has an incredible community science department with lots of projects you can get involved in right now. I highly recommend you check them out, and remember, don't feel intimidated or unqualified. All the instructions you'll need to participate are provided for you. So what did I learn from this experience creating my own research project from scratch? First of all, I keep getting proven to over and over that putting yourself out there is always rewarding. I have a lot of anxiety, a lot of public speaking anxiety, and I found that every single time I've pushed my boundaries, I've learned so much and have grown incredibly as a person, and just feel more confident to take up space in the spaces that I'm in. Second of all, I learned that community science is an incredible opportunity to learn from others, which, if you couldn't tell at this point, I love to do. I think that's how I learn best. I'll tell you, there were several aspects of the project that I felt super confident about, that I felt my college education had prepared me for, and I was sorely wrong. It was quote unquote normal people that didn't have training in science that pointed out critical flaws in my project and ultimately helped me to fix them and made the project go a lot smoother. And then on the other hand, things that I didn't think I had any skill in, I had a handle on. And that's really cool to be able to show yourself. A sub-bullet from this realization is that participating in community science makes you a scientist too. If you are contributing data to science, you're a scientist. Like I said earlier, I have no idea why there's such an intense culture in STEM or in research and science that you have to be formally educated for many, many years and have a degree to be called a scientist. I'm a scientist, you're a scientist. If we think like scientists, we are them. And that's really important. I think knowing that would change a lot of kids' mindsets going into the field and accepting that they're not going to have the same skill set as someone 10 years down the road as them, but they are fully capable and can do it. And then the third realization that I made from this project was I'm a scientist. Realizing that everyone else is already a scientist without training extended over to me. And I realized that because I had made this project and got people involved, that was valid enough to be a scientist. And then that leads to the realization that if I can design a legitimate project, especially with very little experience, you can too. And I want you to be confident in that. Don't ever let your lack of experience keep you away from this field, because it's so incredibly rewarding. One, to discover all the things that you don't know, and two, to show yourself that you are capable of learning and becoming skillful. Yeah. Based on all that, I would love to do a quick check-in and see how you feel. What are you thinking about? I know that when I was your age and in these types of situations, learning about ecology, learning about wildlife, my heart would be racing. And I didn't realize until a few years down the road that was excitement. It meant that I was interested and wanted to be a part of everything. So I want to ask you, do you feel a sense of excitement when learning about harvester hunt or hearing about community science? Would you be interested in participating? Are you a problem solver? Does learning about the problems taking place in California ecosystems make you start to think of possible solutions? Are you thinking about how we could possibly make a difference in these animals or in these species that are struggling? And then finally, does the idea of designing your own research project sound interesting or fun? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I highly consider considering ecological research as a career path for you. Yeah, think about it. And with that, I will turn it over to you and open it up for questions so I can hopefully answer some of them.
Thank you so much, Nadia. It was so great to hear about your background, what got you interested in the work that you're doing, and a really good reminder for all of us that we all are doing science every day in our everyday lives. We are asking questions and thinking about what might happen if, if we're posing different research questions every day. So thank you for sharing with us. We have so many questions, so I'm going to try and get through as many as I can. One that came up just kind of reflecting on your career path and how you got into this. Kaimani and Camilla were curious, kind of when did you decide you wanted to enter into a career path in science?
Oh, goodness. I think this is constantly the memory that I harken back to. When I was, I think, 16, I was assigned to read a book for AP Bio, like in the summer before we actually started taking the class, and it was called Your Inner Fish. If you have not read it, I highly recommend that you do. Kind of a nerdy book, but again, if it's your thing, it's your thing. I remember being on a trip to vacation with my family and reading this book on the plane, and again, like my heart was racing, and for some reason, it just felt a lot of the book was about the scientists' research experiences and what it was like being in the field, and basically what I talked about today, going from being a quote unquote, thinking that you're a quote unquote nobody and then becoming a scientist. I really resonated with that and felt like the only place I would truly belong is where this man was. So yeah, that's basically what got it started.
That's so awesome. We all have those moments that kind of spark that interest, right? You can kind of reflect back. It's nice to think about that. We have a lot of students that are curious, kind of how old do you have to be a scientist? Because some folks are thinking you look maybe younger to be an ant scientist.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said within the presentation, that is a pretty recent realization for me. Honestly, I don't think I started feeling comfortable referring to myself as a scientist until y'all started referring to me as a scientist. But the Baja trip that I took, that really got it all blasted off, I think I was 20. And I saw a couple times asking in the chat how old I am now. I don't mind answering that. I'm only 23. So all of this, like all of the big events that have happened in my life within everything that I mentioned has happened within like 3 years. And trust me when I say that there were plenty of people in my circle that made me feel like I was behind. So there are definitely a lot of really driven people that get into labs even earlier than that. Yeah, it's really up to you. You can be as young as you want.
That's a good reminder for all of us. Let's see, we have some questions about what you study, about some of the ants that you mentioned. Let's see, Grace was curious, how do you recognize a harvester ant? Do they look any different from other ants?
They do look quite a bit different from regular ants. That's a really great question. They are about a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch long. And Argentine ants, which are the ones that you would most commonly see, are a lot smaller. I'd say like at max a 1/4 of an inch, but that's pretty large and not usually seen. Harvester ants are most commonly distinguished by these like awkwardly proportioned oblong heads. They have like a normal ant body, and then they have like this jelly bean for a head. And that's how I distinguish them. They're most commonly red as well, but you can also see black ones and like darker brown ones as well.
Very cool. Let's see, Kwan is curious, this might be a hard question, I'm not sure. What is your favorite type of ant? Or like maybe you're asking about your favorite type of harvester ant, like a queen ant, soldier ant, worker ants. Need some ant knowledge in this group.
Yeah, this is a more complex question that I was getting. I think that, or expecting to get. I think it's funny. If I didn't make it clear in the presentation, I don't know anything about ants. I know a little bit about harvester ants in terms of like their general ecology, but the actual like nest dynamics, I don't know a whole lot. So I wouldn't even be able to tell you all the different types that exist in economy. But the ones that are most commonly seen by you and that would be documented would be workers. So I'm going to say those. They're visible.
That is a good answer. Let's see. I'm looking through our questions. Chelsea is curious, what is a cool fun fact that you've learned about ants?
A cool fun fact that I've learned about ants. I honestly didn't think that they were that important. I'm gonna be honest. And that sounds really ignorant of me to say, coming from such a deep ecology background. Like everything has a place in ecosystems, but it really did not click with me how integral they were to the system for everything. Like they are the basal food structure for everything that's larger. And that goes for a lot of insects. I think we tend to dismiss them because they're gross sometimes. But they are so important. And if all of the nasty bugs that we didn't like actually disappeared like we wanted them to, everything else that we love would also disappear. Yeah.
That's so important to remember how connected we all are. Eric was wondering, do you ever get confused in IDing harvester ants? Like how do you identify a harvester ant versus a fire ant, for example?
With that example specifically, I'd say that the biggest tell is their size. Fire ants are going to be a lot closer in size to Argentine ants, which again are those nasty little black ants that you see everywhere that are invasive and causing a ruckus to everything. The question was how to distinguish harvester ants from others, right? Yeah, I'd say
Yeah, or
again.
do you ever get confused like identifying them? Eric was specifically asking about fire ants.
Yeah. So again, for fire ants, it would mostly be the size and their awkwardly sized heads. But in terms of distinguishing harvester ants within the genus, because there are a bunch of different types of harvester ants, I cannot tell. I have to go to my mentor because he's the ant dude. He's really good with them and be like, what's the difference between a California harvester ant and a black harvester ant, whatever. Yeah, I'm still learning. I still
Always
get
more to learn.
yeah.
Okay, another ant question. Elude is curious, why do Argentine ants cause problems and why are they so aggressive? Is there kind of a reason behind that?
Oh goodness, I think we'd all like to know. I There's a very common theme in non-native invasive species that they explode and they do really well in urban settings for some reason. I don't think anyone has the reason why, except that they're brought into a new environment that just so happens to work for them really well and they take advantage of that. And that's basically the core of it. They have some kind of ability to extract resources in a way that's better than the native species or more efficient, and just kind of kicks everything else to the wayside.
Yeah, we've seen that. You showed the example of the squirrels in your slide about native and non-native species. That's very true. It seems to be a trend. We have a lot of students who are curious if harvester ants bite. Do you happen to know?
Yeah, they bite. They're not very aggressive, so they definitely won't commonly just come up to you and attack you like fire ants will. But they are definitely defensive if you're irritating them and getting all up in their space. I will say though that like throughout our observation period, everyone was super respectful and I didn't hear of anyone getting bitten. So yeah, you can get pretty up close to them and take pictures and no problem.
Good to know. Good question to ask. Okay, let's see. Lauren and Jimena were curious. When you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, it changed quite a bit of times, or quite a number of times. I think I wanted to be a dentist at first. And then I wanted to be in the Air Force for some reason. I don't know where that came from. It was just a lot of random stuff because I don't think I realized that I could turn the things that I liked into a career. I was kind of just looking at the people that were around me. And I think that's honestly been one of the coolest parts is like discovering it for myself and rolling into it.
Love that. Kind of a related question. Jaylena was curious, how did you find the job that you wanted, or how did you do research kind of looking at, maybe you mentioned a couple different programs that you joined. How did you find those?
I kept my eyes and my ears open. I'll be honest, I should have mentioned this. I'm actually a transfer student, so I haven't been at Cal State Fullerton the whole time. I was actually going to Irvine Valley College for 2 years before I transferred to a 4-year. And I think honestly, going to community college was a great decision. I'm really glad that I did it to give me time to figure out stuff and because it's cheaper. But I will say that it did give me the false perception that there just weren't opportunities out there because my community college didn't focus on ecology very much. So as soon as I got to Fullerton, it felt like there were things just being thrown left and right. I found out about that study abroad Baja course, just being in an ecology course, and someone came in and was like, hey, this is a class we have. I've been on it. It's really fun. It changed my life. Y'all should also apply. So I did. Didn't even think I was going to get accepted. And I did. And like I said, it was a life-changing experience. And I really just followed a pattern of that afterwards, listening for experiences from other students, opportunities that they had that really affected them, and then just kind of like modeling it after people that I really respected. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, good to keep your ears and eyes open for opportunities that maybe you wouldn't even expect, which sounds like a lot of how you kind of fell into this work. And cool research projects.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And this also might be one of the hardest questions that we've asked so far. Chelsea is curious, what is your favorite thing about nature, being in nature?
Oh, goodness, that is a very hard question. Without getting too hippy-dippy on everyone, I very much feel the sense of interconnectedness when I'm in nature. Not only between everything that's in the ecosystem interacting with one another, but myself within that space as well. And there's something so supremely calming and almost like religious about it. And it astounds me every single day to see how perfectly everything works, and has a place for itself. And the seamlessness is really what amazes me. Yeah.
It is really beautiful to just sit and watch and witness, right? Nature happening around you and you as a part of nature. It's something that is so important also as in scientific discovery. It's just like being present and a part of it. And just seeing what's around. Well, thank you so much, Nadia. It was so great to learn more about you and the work that you do. We want to keep ourselves continuing to hear about your research, and hopefully you'll keep us posted on the next harvester hunt.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for coming today and listening.
Thank you, Nadia. I'm going to go ahead and close us out of our program. We had so many great questions that came into the chat. So I want to remind folks, if you have more questions, I saw a lot about ants that we didn't get to. Feel free to write them down so you don't forget, and do research on your own after this program. Thank you so much for the thank yous in the chat. It's so great to see you all in here. If you want to see more from the Natural History Museum, you can give us a follow on Instagram at NHMLA. We also have this recording and others of various presentations we've done throughout the school year on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/NHMLA. This is our last webinar for 2021. Can you believe it? And so we will be saying goodbye for now. We'll start these back up in spring of 2022. We hope to see you all there at that time. Thank you so much. It was so great to be with you all this morning. Bye.